Hello there, everybody, and I am here with Adam Torel of Third Window Films. Adam, I'm so thankful that you're doing this. Third Window has been special for me for a long time, so thank you for taking the time to step in and talk about you guys.
Thanks for having me on and for loving or liking at least the label.
Third Window Films has done a lot over the years. First of all, you guys have been around a lot longer than people think. What are we at, like 16, 17 years, something like that?
I started in 2000. I started acquiring in 2005, but
Right.
when my first release was 2007. So yes, been releasing for more than 15 years, but around for 17. Yeah, it's when I did it was the 15th anniversary of the first release a few weeks ago, and I really forgot. And when I looking back at it, it was quite nostalgic. But yeah, it has been a long time.
And not only has the industry seen a lot of changes, the trends of releases seen a lot of changes, but you personally, I'm sure, have seen a lot of changes in the last 15 years. You recently just moved, and now you're in Japan, correct?
Actually, I've been in Japan since for about nearly 10 years.
Wow.
I moved over to work on a film called The Land of Hope, a Shion Sono film. And since that allowed me to sort of get a visa and get a foothold here. And for the first 2 years, I was half and half. But
Right.
probably for the last 7, 8 years, I've been here full time. And I don't think I could go back to England or Europe, to be honest.
That's fantastic. I mean, if you love it that much, I'm certainly jealous. I've wanted to make my way out there for quite some time, and I've got young kids, which makes it a couple of people will think that makes it like twice as difficult. It's actually like 10 times as difficult. The stuff that you guys put out, is there like a definition of what you try to say Third Window Films tries to distribute to the world?
Basically, I've been just trying to release films that aren't getting released for one reason or another, mainly because they're probably not that commercial or they're not that popular. And,
Right.
there's a lot of Japanese films. I think people really don't truly understand how many films are made here each year for a country of which films don't go overseas. There's about 600 films made every year, and only really like a small handful of them get overseas. So there's a lot. I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of crap, but there's a lot of crap everywhere. And
Yeah.
I mean, American independent cinema has its pitfalls as well. But I just try to do my best about getting as many films that I like and aren't getting the light of day and getting them out there.
Am I right in remembering that Third Window is pretty much all you?
Yes, and that's the only way that I've been able to do what I'm able to do. I think if I had staff and an office and all that, then there'd be these overheads, and then you have to start thinking in a business-minded sense. And I'm not terribly business-minded, and I'm awful at delegating. So maybe it just became me because I'm quite stubborn in that way. But it also, I think, helps with being able to get these tiny Japanese films out there, and also being able to speak Japanese and do a lot of the work behind the scenes, like the subtitling and the shooting the bonus features myself and editing and doing all the layouts for the artwork and all that. And over the years, it's become, yes, just well, it always was me. But initially, I used to outsource some jobs, and now I try to do everything as much as possible by myself in my little Tokyo apartment.
That is beyond impressive. I mean, the amount of work that it takes to do some of these, especially in the last year, you guys have, it seems like, made an effort to put out some. I hate to use the word bigger titles, but they're more like mainstream to capture some new viewers. It appears, and I mean the effort that something. I was going to talk about this one later, but something like this that you guys put out, that has to take a lot from you.
Yeah, but that's not really getting any new viewers, to be honest. I mean, those that's more of a passion project because I really wanted to help the director because he's had so many troubles in the past.
Right.
Japan is quite strict on any criminal offenses, and their idea of a criminal offense is quite stricter than maybe Western. So
Yeah.
he's had some problems with like tiny amounts of marijuana in the past or something that's had him blacklisted. And I've always liked him as a person, as a filmmaker. So I put the extra effort in to promote him and to keep his name alive because I think without having films out on a physical format, there is, even if they're only selling small amounts, there's in 10 years time, will that have, it's like if a tree falls in the woods,
Right.
if it isn't out there in a lot and in people's hands, then in 10 years' time it could be forgotten. And that's the same for directors. If their work is not out there in people's hands, in people's houses, whether or not they constantly watch them or not, I think it's for the sake of the future, it's really important. So the Toyota's things were more just a passion of love, and all the hours put into it wasn't that hard because I'm quite friends with him. So I go to, he comes to my house and we put my computer on and we just record the audio commentary into my computer as it is. So it's obviously the subtitling all that takes time, but it's just to help him out as much as possible.
That's still you're obviously speaking with a lot of humility, but it's still a lot of work. And one of the things that I try to do on my channel and the way that I am discussing with these people that are into this hobby is really break down how much work these are, because a lot of people take them for granted. And one of the biggest complaints nowadays is pricing, especially, the entire world. We're in the middle of a giant inflation surge over the last couple of years. People are out of work. People are literally dying across the globe. And so, yes, physical media is low on the priority list in the grand scheme of those things. But if you are going to take the time to appreciate these things, it's important to know what goes into them and the people behind them. So that's the main reason I wanted to have you on here today, so people could see the face behind Third Window and perhaps feel more of the tug on the heartstring to dive more into Japanese cinema. So first of all, again, thank you for all of these releases. The first one I wanted to highlight, because I feel like this is what brought a lot of people to you guys for the first time, is One Cut of the Dead. I think you had a huge hand in this, right?
Well, I think that, yes, it was such a successful hit, but that had a lot of work that I put into it personally. Right. That was a film that I took on way before it was released in Japan, and I love that film so much. I mean, when I'm looking for a film to distribute, if that film has not become popular through film festivals, through international media, and this and that, then it becomes very hard to actually distribute the film. For example, if a film I distributed recently called Zoki, it didn't play any film festivals because the sales agent wasn't so good about it getting into film festivals, and therefore when it's released, it had no fanfare and nobody wanted to pick it up. So I'm always nervous that if I leave it all up to these sales agents or these producers, then it's no point me distributing it because they're gonna screw it up one way or another. The Japanese are very good at the international. So what I did is, in the cases of One Cut of the Dead and many other films like Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, is if it's a film I want to distribute, I'd go to them the very beginning and said, look, let me bring your film worldwide and act as a sales agent, put it into film festivals, make the correct artwork so it's going to be popular and get picked up, and do everything required to get that film out there, then bring it all around the world for a year or two, sell it to other distributors as well, and then distribute it myself so that all the work I put into it also comes back to me in that respect. And One Cut of the Dead was one that I brought to like 150 film festivals, and also in order to keep the cost down for the producer, well, he made a lot of money in the end anyway, but only had like 3 DCPs over 150 film festivals. So like every cost, bring all the cost of subtitling, I'll do that. Let's not make any expensive DCPs. If you give to a big company to handle, it's like, well, we have to go to Cannes and we have to market it there, and that's going to cost you like $20,000 because of our hotel. And then we're going to go to this festival and this festival, and then we need like 100 DCPs and like 300 posters and all that. And it's like, no. Let's cut all those costs off, and I'm just going to put the time and effort in and get that film to 150 film festivals without costing anything. So it's all profit as well. So yeah, I really put a lot of effort in. Of course, it's a fantastic film, but there are many fantastic films out there that don't get out there because of the sales agents wanting too much money for it or something. I mean, there are so many examples of Asian films that should be more well known and aren't, because the companies that handle them are a bit of a pain. So yes, One Cut was one that I think really did help my company get out there, but it was years of work as well.
Well, it shows, and that release is special not only just for the film itself, but everything that is on that disc, the packaging of it. It was quite obvious that it was somebody that had this as a passion project. So again, just everything is evident that when you are putting your mind to it, they can be incredible. And I just hats off to you for one person being able to produce all of this is astonishing. And I'm curious, because if I remember right, most, probably not most, but a lot of the films on the label they're not available literally anywhere else, right?
Yeah, in many cases, it's the only release. Even, for example, with the Toshiki Toyota films, some of them are not even available in Japan.
Right.
I mean, recently, Funky Forest and Warped Forest. Warped Forest was never released in any format, not even in cinemas in Japan. So it was the first time the film was ever released outside of a film festival. And I mean, I also think that because these films have such a limited audience, that if it isn't the only release of the film out there, then I don't think it'll be, it'll sell enough to break even. And even in those cases, for example, I mean, you mentioned the fact that, of course, there's so many Blu-ray release companies out there, and there's only so much money that each people have. But how many copies it does take to break even on how many copies sold it takes to break even on these releases? And for example, if a film like Crazy Thunder Road, which is was the only release of the film in 40 years outside of Japan, and it hasn't even sold 1,000 copies, which is the break-even point. So, and that's not so expensive. I mean, if you're paying like 13, 14 pounds to buy the disc, the only version of, and with loads of exclusive extras as well, and yet that hasn't broken even. So, I think I try to bring the price down as much as I can, but a lot of these titles don't even break even, and that's why I need films like One Cut of the Dead and Hiroko the Goblin and the obvious titles to balance those others. Yeah.
So if you're open to sharing, is 1,000 usually about the break-even point for most titles?
Yes, I mean, usually if you want to pay any sort of guarantee, which is required to usually license the films, then usually the cost of breaking even on, for example, the Blu-ray authoring, the manufacturing of 1,000 units, the certification costs by the BBFC and all that, you're talking about 600 units or 500 units, and then you have the price you have to pay to acquire the film on top of that. And yes, it takes about 1,000 copies to break even, and it's hard to sell 1,000 copies nowadays, to be honest.
That hurts. With some of your, obviously, like One Cut of the Dead is a bigger title. With some of the smaller titles, how like, I wasn't going to bring this one up yet, but Ruined Heart. I just watched this for the first time the other night, and this movie, first of all, it's a beautiful movie. This is such an astonishing release. Not sure your history with this one. I've not gotten to any of the extras on it, other than the music is incredible. It is shot magnificently, but I don't feel like anybody's talking about this film. So if you can, how many have you sold a Ruined Heart?
That just sold its 1,000th copy.
Wow.
Only 1,000 were made, and we're talking about I don't know, 6 years ago.
Right.
So it took about 6 years to sell them through. Just 1,000 copies. But that's an experimental film, and I really can't expect people, unless you're really into experimental cinema. I don't think it's easy one to get into, but it's a very interesting release with a nice booklet, the soundtrack CD, and for people that want to try something, want to try something a little experimental with like those sales points of Asano Tadanobu, Christopher Doyle, music by Stereo Total. I mean, it's an interesting package, but yes, it's a bit of a hard one to recommend. I mean, that came about by a company called Rapid Eye Movies, who are a German distributor of Asian and cult cinema who've been around for about 20 years or more. And they were a company that I used to love before I got into distribution, and I really respected them. And that the owner of that company, a guy called Stefan Hall, went into film production, first with a film called Underwater Love, which I released, and recently, and afterwards with Ruined Heart and a few others. And I always wanted to support him because he's also in a lot of trouble as a distributor, and going into production as well makes things even harder. So
of course,
in those releases, I just wanted to help him. Underwater Love and Ruined Heart and the Pink films as well were projects of his. And yes, they were. He bought a film scanner and he tried to scan all these old Pink films, but the costs were too expensive. So I was like, okay, I'll help you distribute them and pay you money to cover your costs, and just to help him keep going with what he loves, because I love him as a person and I respect his company. So yeah, it's hard for everyone who tries to do these sort of non-mainstream films, I think.
Well, I hope the overall karma of you trying to share that has come back to you many times over, because some of these, again, I fear that no one would get to see some of these because they would literally never get a release. So something like Ruined Heart obviously has a lower audience, and it just got to 1,000 over 6 years. But some of these others, like the Toyota box sets, have those done fairly well for you?
The first box set I made 2000, and they literally just sold out over the last year, and that was
Right.
yeah, that was about took about 5-6 years, and that wasn't they were all region releases of three films that had never been released. Nine's also been released on DVD before, but they were the first Blu-ray releases in the world. Not even in Japan were they,
Wow.
and that took yes about 6 years to sell 2000, and at a much cheaper price point than the new box set because of the fact that through COVID, a lot of the costs for manufacturing and everything else have gone up, which is why I've had to release so many more mainstream films over the last
Right.
couple of years because it's really, really, really gotten a lot harder. So the new Toyota box set had a much higher price point, but more films, and in total it's sold about 800 copies so far. But I had to press 2,000 because the cost of pressing just 1,000 makes the per unit cost way too
Right.
much. So I've still got 1,000 copies in boxes.
Well, I hope this inspires at least some people to check them out, because a lot of these are just beautiful, touching movies, and they are quite obvious somebody's like life's work encapsulated in one film in many of these instances, and that is it's so hard to see nowadays because especially with people that are just into Western cinema and they're overridden with studioed, watered down trash, basically. Not to put those down too much, but a lot of the culture that you can find in these, you can't really pay for an experience like that unless you're going to do something like this, and it's astonishing what you've been able to release.
Just luckily, especially being in Japan, has allowed me to work directly with
Right.
directors and producers without needing to go through studios, which make things more expensive and more complicated. Dealing with Japanese companies in general is very hard for Westerners because it's a complete opposite way of working. And because Japan is such an island nation, I'm from England, which is an island nation, of course, but it's very different in the fact that Japan, everything is domestic, and all
Right.
the films make their money back in Japan, so they don't think about the international market and they don't really understand the international market. So, for me to go to them and explain to them, you know, the, your costs that you're asking for are completely different to what the actual market is, they just don't understand that because they're disconnected from it. So,
Right.
working with those studios makes things yes very stressful. So luckily being here and speaking Japanese, I can go to people like Toyota directly, and sometimes he can push the studios on my behalf to help me with the with Ishikatsu Hito for films like Funky Forest and all that. Like having someone who's being close to directors or producers, they can give the studios a push if required, and
Right.
it does help things. So it gives me a side advantage. But then again, if there were more people interested in buying these films, then it would be completely different. But there's less people interested in, as in sales agents or distributors buying these films because the audience is obviously not there. So
Right.
it's I don't know. I wouldn't say it's pointless, but yes, it's a bit niche.
On that note, and this is maybe going to sound like an ignorant Westerner type of question to ask, but with the ultra rise in Hong Kong cinema getting more attention lately, with some of the Korean cinema getting more attention lately, with Asian cinema just getting a lot of love from a lot of labels, is there any like paying attention to Japanese cinema rising that you feel like people are seeking it out more in any sense of that?
I think the success of a lot of the Korean popular titles of the last few years, or if you look at things like Squid Game or Parasite, they're a little more alternative or a little more
Right.
uh, genre.
Yeah.
And also, I think the Korean and Hong Kong audience producers and public, they're used to making those sorts of films and promoting them because they know that sells well.
Right.
But as I mentioned, Japan is very insular, and films like that are making it obviously is like Drive My Car, which is actually sort of a foreign film in essence because all the people behind it are foreign. Is yeah, it's maybe if people are watching that, they're not going to want to watch a film like One Cut of the Dead because it's completely different genre.
Right.
While Parasite maybe brings you into more sort of fantastic type titles, and the type of Japanese films that have traditionally been popular, with the exception of Asia Extreme, it has been like Ozu and Kurosawa, and those are
Right.
the films that maybe people that don't watch Japanese cinema would want to watch. You have obviously the battle royale fans, of which there are many of them, but they don't make those films in Japan. To be honest, I mean, I think a lot
Right.
of the films that were popular overseas were just not popular in Japan, and therefore they don't make them, like Shion Sono, the Sushi Typhoon type films of, like, Hell Driver and Machine Girl and all that. Those are films
Right.
aimed at a sort of international audience, but they're not popular in Japan. So it's a catch-22. It's like, if you make a film for the international audience and it doesn't do well, then you're in trouble. But if you make a film for the Japanese audience, then you have a very much better chance of it making money. So they mainly focus on that side.
That makes sense. And making money. This is probably one of the first times that I noticed third window films in more of an empathetic way last year. And I'm not sure if you remember. I'm sure you do, because it clearly affected you. But you posted across social media that there was a film that you guys released that when you Googled it, the entire first page of results was for bootlegs and torrents. There are a lot of people still naive to the fact of how that can affect people. So considering that a lot of these, the only official release is through third window films, can you share how something like that can literally like destroy one of these labels?
And it's also actually not just destroying the labels, which it obviously does, because people aren't buying it; they're downloading it illegally. But it's the reason also why Japanese companies don't sell their films to the international market, because they know that if a distributor takes it on, it's immediately going to be pirated. And Japan is very different to the rest of the world, because piracy is not an issue in Japan. I think Korea piracy and a lot of other parts of Asia, obviously China and Hong Kong, Korea, piracy is a big problem for them. So they also understand that it's a problem for everyone else, and they just basically try to get things out at the same time to beat piracy in that respect. But the Japanese, because as I mentioned before, Japanese are so strict on criminals. I mean, to the fact that I remember hearing a story that a kid had downloaded one film, just one film, and the police went and broke down his doors and put him in jail for one film. And they do that in the same way that Toyota is arrested for like half a gram of or some whatever tiny amount of marijuana, is to make sure that people don't commit crimes. I mean, Japan is quite famous for having a 99% conviction rate. They make examples a lot so that people don't commit crimes. So therefore, they think that if a film that they give to a distributor or allow a distributor to take, it's immediately going to get pirated, and therefore it's going to hurt them. So they just said, all right, we're just not going to sell our films unless it's a big enough amount of money that it makes it worthwhile for us. But that a massive amounts of money is something that distributors like myself, because we have trouble with piracy, cannot afford to pay. So it's a sort of complicated situation for everyone. But yes, piracy is yes, it kills everyone, but it kills smaller distributors who have lots less margins more than it kills like Hollywood, I guess, because Hollywood is still having tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people watching their films in cinemas. And if I'm only selling like 500 Blu-rays, then if I lose a couple hundred of that, then that's half the sales. Yes,
that's depressing. When you posted that last year, I have a weekly live show, and that was a good 10 or 15 minutes of discussion on how supporting some of these smaller labels not only leads to success for that label, but literally to the hobby as a whole. It encourages others to participate, to watch, to ensure that we're archiving film and art in general. And I don't know. I feel like there are still millions of people that don't think it's a problem anymore. And the fact that in 2021 you had to come out and post and say, look, I just put out this film and this is the only thing that you can find on the internet right now. It's so debilitating.
Well, it's right. I think a lot of people also misread what I was saying. There were a lot of people saying, well, we Google searched it and it wasn't the pirate sites. But what I should have probably been a little more clear is that when I release a film, I usually search for the last week or two of hits on Google, because that's the things will be related to the release. And they were, yes, all pirate sites. But yes, as you mentioned, I think people don't really, even my mother who knows her son runs a film company, is like, oh, I'll just download that later. And it's like, don't tell me that. I mean, this is what I do for a living. Like, it doesn't occur to her that that's a problem. And I think many people in the world just don't think of it as a problem. But then again, you in this world nowadays where like, you pay $5 a month and you get like access to like thousands of films, a film itself has become less valuable.
Correct.
Living in Japan really makes you see the world from a different standpoint, because it's a world where video on demand is not popular here yet, where people go to the cinema, and the cinema prices don't have matinee prices. In fact, they've gone up over the last couple of years. There's no dollar cinemas or things like that as they do in the States, and it's like you pay to see the movie, you sit through the movie to the very end of the credits to give respect to the people that have made that movie, and if you like it, you can go and rent it from a video store and watch it again. But it's about paying and supporting, because if something gets cheaper and cheaper, the price can't go back up afterwards,
Right.
and therefore something becomes less and less valuable the more the cheaper it is marketed as. And we unfortunately live in this. Luckily for movie watchers who can watch anything for pay $5 a month and watch like thousands of films. But yes, it makes it a lot harder to continue making films. And I think I can't expect everyone to go and spend like £15 on a DVD or Blu-ray, or or just blind buy something just to support. But I think in general, if people can understand that the amount of work, effort, time that goes into getting out these things, you don't have to buy this one, but at least in general try to support things. I mean, you wouldn't go to a shop and go, "Oh, that Coca-Cola looks nice, I'm just going to steal it," would you?
Right.
But you, at the same time, you're like, "Oh, I want to watch this movie, I'm just going to download it." And it's the same thing. I mean, you're in essence stealing for something that people have made, and it hurts a lot more when that Coca-Cola is like Adam's Coca-Cola and it's only 100 made.
That's a good point. Well, speaking of getting people to support, you've already announced some titles coming out the rest of the year, and they seem to be some that people are really after. So, do you mind sharing any info on Suicide Club?
Suicide Club has some problems. It was supposed to have been released, and obviously the Shion Sono situation has come up, and all the people that were connected to helping put out the release, as in making new audio commentaries. Unfortunately, that film never had any bonus features from the original Japanese release, and you can't just release a bare bones disc nowadays. You need to obviously make it a collectibles item, and I have somebody making very nice artwork for it, some illustrated artwork, and I had lots of bonus features all set up, and everybody just pulled out of it after the accusations.
Right.
And I tried to renegotiate with the sales agent to allow me to, and also the video on demand company that was supposed to buy it dropped out as well. So I tried to renegotiate to bring the price down to make it worthwhile, and they wouldn't let me. So I had to. It's just sort of on hold. Like I haven't paid for it because I can't afford the amount there without having to pre-sell it to some VOD companies. So yeah, it's a bit on the back burner. I mean, I think people have forgotten about the Sono thing because, like, at the time everybody was saying we're not going to support a Shion Sono film, and now loads of people are mailing me and said when's the release of Suicide Club. So I don't know. It's if everyone, to be honest, I know Shion Sono personally, and I don't think the accusations or he's been pictured in a light that is really just to who he is as a person. I think he's been a little scapegoated in a very heated situation, but I can't really say that he's an angel either. So it's a bit complicated, and that release is I don't know what to say. I mean, it's
I get that. What about the Obayashi stuff that's supposed to be coming?
Yeah, that's a big release, a box set as the previous Obayashi box set, but with films that are a lot more accessible. They're not all 3 hours long, and that has obviously helped a lot in making bonus features and checking the subtitles and doing everything else. Because so I'm just finalizing up some audio commentaries right now, and I've got the artwork just finished by the same person who did the last artwork, and hopefully I'll have some news by the end of August or something of release date. But it'll be those are 4 fantastic films. They're all quite different in their own way, and they're never been released outside of Japan before. So I think it should be, or I hope it will. It's a popular set.
I've already had multiple people ask me about that since we posted about that earlier this year when you announced that was coming. So I know that there are people already looking out for it.
Yes, and they're all going to say, "Why is it locked to Region B?" And I don't think also people realize that it's not we're not the bad guys. It's not our fault. And speaking also as a producer, from the other side, as in from the perspective of the people that are selling the film to distributors, if you allow somebody to make it all region, unless they're paying a huge amount of money for it, it's very complicated. It means that you can only sell it to, in essence, one distributor.
Right.
And if you're a producer or something and making a film, you need as many distributors to buy the film so that you can make as much money as you can to recoup any sort of costs. I mean, obviously these are old films, so there's no cost in that sense. But you know, it's not easy to just like make it region free and make it available to everyone. It's not our fault. And of course, I'd love to make it region free because then it can increase my sales. But I've contract that says I can't, and if I do, I'm in breach of a contract. And you know, it's a lot harder for distributors to make a film region free than like a user just buying a region free player. And I always say that you don't need to buy a player sold as region free. There are many players that you can buy on Amazon in Black Friday for like $30 that can be made region free very simply with just a remote control hack. And every time I get a mail, I copy and paste the same reply to each one. Just go to this website and get a region free player that can be made region free.
I also suggest for people just go to like amazon.co.uk and get a region B player so you can always have one connected, and now you got the best of both worlds.
But that's more complicated because that requires a voltage adapter,
right?
And I think people would just I'll tell you, like when I lived in the States for a while, and I got some Toshiba $40 player, and before I bought it, I went on DVDhacks.com and I found the player that that you could press two buttons on the remote control and it's region free. I mean, it's not too complicated. It's not like you have to mod chip something like you used to.
I still have people ask things like, is Third Window Films, is their stuff region free? And I think that there are still too many people that think the labels get to decide if things are region locked. Can you share some of the process behind that since you've worked on both sides?
Well, as I just mentioned, I think we have contracts with these sales agents, and the contracts stipulate we can sell within our territory, which is a territory that is being described as locked to a certain region.
Right.
So, for example, region A is America and it's English, and region B is Europe, and then obviously there's the language that can be used on the disc as well.
Right.
And if I want to have, because I'm an English language, I have English subtitles. If I were to make mine region A, it ends up therefore being available in the States, and therefore they can't sell that film to the States. And were I to pay a large amount of money, I could buy both regions, but I can't. Sometimes with very small films, you can negotiate, and I do have some films that are region free because I've said, if I'm the only person that's going to release this film in the world, then look, let me just take all regions, and then it'll increase the sales, and therefore I can give you a better royalty based on sales. But if it's a popular title, then I think it's impossible. I mean, I know nowadays, with 4K and all that, or UHD, they're made as region free or something. But the costs, you can't put a 4K out of a Japanese small independent film. It's pointless.
You can't put a 4K of Ruined Heart out there.
It's only shot in 2K, so yes. I think also people forget, when I went to these Japanese films, that it's like shot on 16 millimeters. It's like you can't put that out in 4K because you can't blow up 16 millimeter to 4K, or like you're talking about like films that have budgets of like I don't know, $50,000 or $100,000, and it's going to look worse in 4K because then the budgetary constraints and the lack of proper lighting used in filming is going to look awful. Like people, get so caught up in these things that are set by massive. Of course, you want to watch Avatar in 4K, but it doesn't mean that you can put like Ruined Heart in 4K.
Right. And not to mention, even if you really wanted to try, the restoration price on that would almost be probably the budget of the entire film.
Yes, and also Japanese aren't very willing to restore in 4K, and they don't like their prints to leave Japan either, in order for a foreign company to do that as well. So, but in the end, if it's Battle Royale, then you can put it in 4K because people are going to buy it. But you can't put all the costs into some small Japanese films that are barely selling 1,000 copies. I mean, if I had done Crazy Thunder Road in 4K or something, I'd be in big trouble right now.
On the monetary note, if you could share, I've heard some behind the scenes rumors that the price essentially to license a Japanese film in region B is exponentially less than to license it to region A.
For sure. I mean, because region A is America, and America is is, how many, 5-6 times the population of the UK. And when you have more people, then you have a bigger audience to sell to, and therefore the price is, represents that. But it still doesn't actually represent. It's not like an American originator is like 5 times, 6 times more. Actually, it's only a little bit more, or maybe double the price for UK, which makes it even harder as a UK distributor because we're English. Because we release films in English.
Right.
The sales agents also know that it opens up the market to Europe, because a lot of people in France or Germany can speak English, would buy discs from England, where if it's a French release with French only subtitles, you're basically limited to maybe to France only.
Right.
So the costs are very high for such a small population just because of the language. So it's a lot harder to release a film as an English distributor than an American distributor, I believe, because it just doesn't really work out percentage-wise.
That makes sense. That was the monetary side of things. So to get into the person behind Third Window, who is Adam? How'd you get where you are? You mentioned living in the States, living in the UK, living in Japan. You've had a busy life.
Yeah, I moved to the States when I was 10. My mother won a green card. They used to have a lottery that could give you American green cards, and we won it and moved to the States. And we moved to Florida, of all places. Not the most cultural.
Right.
So, but I ended up working. There was a video store in Florida called Video Renaissance, which was, if it wasn't in Florida, it would be world famous. They had about 50,000 films. 50,000, can you imagine?
Right.
Of the owner had been buying every single film in every format since the 80s and just never thrown away anything. So any out of print, things like films like Fear, Anxiety, and Depression, the Todd Haynes debut film, like all that stuff like on VHS, that it was basically an archive that was stuck in this very small town called Sarasota in Florida, and it was a pity that it was in a place like that, because if it was in New York, I mean, people would come from all over.
Right.
And I worked there for years, and that's where I sort of understood the concept of distribution, because just watching and buying every film we could as a shop, but then again, not being able to see so many films because they weren't distributed.
Right.
So that really got me into distribution, and also being able to about Asian cinema. At the time it was I would trade with Video Search of Miami, who was a VHS they were saying these big handwritten catalogs, and you wouldn't know what anything is, because it's just a catalog with words, and you just say, well, that sounds good, and you post them a letter back, and they would send you Centipede Horror, and then you watch fifth generation VHS, and they got me so much into obscure Asian cinema, and I moved back to England when I was 20, and at the time Tartan Films was quite popular with its Asia Extreme brand, and I interned there for a year or so, and I realized that from the outside, companies like that seem fantastic, but when you work in companies, you realize that you think that everyone there is going to be big fans of cinema and Asian cinema and know everything, but then it's not really the case, and I think it's a bit disillusioning, and I stopped then and started Third Window Films.
That is a heck of a journey, and I think that there are a lot of people that have obviously not the same ending necessarily, but a lot of the people that are in this hobby, their passion started with memories like walking through a video rental store, or their parents' collection of laser discs or something like that. And it is to me, it feels like we are in essentially the true modern golden age of physical media. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I think there has been
in this generation, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky because it has become cool, but not for example, records became popular again over the last few years, and that after so many years of digital really becoming the mainstream, it became popular again to buy records or collect or buy books, or Blu-rays or DVDs. But I wonder if it really is the golden age, because if you think of if it was so popular, then there'd be loads of record shops, video shops, rental shops, and things on the high street, and or retailers online, but there isn't really that many. And when I look back at when I first started off, or even during the first 2 years, I was speaking yesterday to my friend Joey at Terracotta Distribution, and he would release a film and sell 3,000 copies in the first week, and I would have titles that would sell even tiny Japanese films that would sell thousands and thousands of copies. And nowadays, I can have a major Japanese film barely selling 1,000 copies. So I wonder if it's. I mean, of course, it's become a little cooler now, and the collector's market has become maybe stronger, but it's really only a few companies that are doing it, and there aren't really that many films getting out there compared to what they used to be. But Blu-ray is actually expensive. I think DVD was really the best market and it was cheap to make, and there was just so many films getting out there. So it's changed, but I don't know. I think DVD at its heyday was much better for film lovers because not format lovers. I think that's the difference nowadays. Is everybody's buying them, but I wonder how many people are actually watching the films and how many are watching the bonus features on disc. I think they like to say that they've got these films and they've got these bonus features, but I feel that DVD was a time where people would actually watch the films a lot more.
That is a probably very true statement, and which is why I tried to really cultivate the sort of community of people to actually discuss what they think of these films and how it affected them. And I don't know. When I mentioned the golden age, I'm really thinking in more of a post-streaming world, and it seems like this is. I'm not going to say it's going to be on its way down, but it seems like through COVID, everything got really strong for a good year and a half or so, and now that heat seems to be coming off a little bit again. And
yeah, I think thanks to companies like Arrow Films who really have cultivated a strong audience, and yes, I think there was a lot of feeling from people and there has been a lot of feeling over the past few years of supporting of independent films doing better than Hollywood films. And that sort of want to support, your local DIY records store and your local coffee shop. And I think the whole independent has become popular. I mean, if you walk down any main street of a major city nowadays, it's all like shops made to look, or like they're being run by a family. Which is. Sort of brings it back to the concept of sort of independent film distribution. It's that DIY record label type feeling to it. Exactly. But I think, I don't know. I think it maybe works more as a theory than I really wonder sometimes. How well. But I think Arrow and some companies like that, and there have been lots of new distributors. Surprisingly, I wouldn't have thought there'd be so many new distributors popping up. Like there's Era 4444 and Chameleon Films in Australia, and Radiance popping up now. But I'm always surprised that some of these companies release 1-2 films, and people on the internet saying this is my new favorite label, and it's well, some companies have been working for many more years, and it's releasing 2 films. Maybe it's consistent. You get 100% with 2 good films, but try that over 15 years.
Well, that is a really good time to ask some of these older titles that you put out maybe 5 or 6 years ago that have not sold their first 1,000 yet. Are there any that you think deserve a second look that people should really be looking into if they get the idea to try to support Third Window right now?
I'd probably have to look at what I do forget. I mean, there are actually surprisingly films that surprisingly haven't done or haven't broken even yet, like the re-release of Fish Story on Blu-ray. I really expected that to do a lot better, being the only Blu-ray release of the film in the world and region free and having loads of extras. The DVD sold really well during its time, and the Blu-ray has not even broken even yet. So I do think that's a sort of film that's easy to recommend, whether you're into any sort of cinema. I think it can be one that everybody likes. And my most recent release of Summertime Machine Blues, I also think that's the type of film that you don't really have to be hardcore into Asian cinema or even cinema in general, and it's a film that would make you enjoy it and feel good, and it's a very good film and a great release full of extras, and the only release of the film outside of Japan. So I think there are lots of films, yes, but whether they be my label or somebody else's, yes, please everyone, just I think watching films is good.
And like I said, not only for supporting these groups, but it is literally archiving art. And some of the ways that we can do this is literally just to keep it in our minds, be able to make it a part of our modern history as well, and not just something that happened 40 years ago and was a blip in a history book, basically.
Yeah, it's really important, and you do learn this. I mean, being a doing this for a while. For example, there was a director called Uchida Kenji who releases films like Key of Life, A Stranger of Mine, and he made a few very good Japanese films about 10 years ago. But none of those films were ever really released, and he stopped making films for years, and he's sort of unknown. He's because his films never made it out there into people's hands. He's essentially sort of I don't want to say died, but like in a sort of cultural sense,
Right.
he doesn't exist. And for somebody who made all these great films back then, it's important that they exist and not just like a, of course it's easier to rent a film and maybe people don't have so much room in their houses and all that. Of course, that we can't all have big houses. Even I live in Tokyo and I don't have so much room anymore. But I think the concept of having and supporting physical anything that keep art alive and keep because if your computer breaks or if a computer breaks, I think last year there was some big situation with Intel or something I remember that like the data was wiped out for a long time, and if that happens and all these films are lost, then what are you going to do? So in one way or another, if you can keep something or another to pass on to your children or pass on to the next generation, it's important.
That was very well said. That is why the restoration work being done on some of these older films is something that needs to be supported. The fact that we are putting time and energy into for your company primarily documenting the hands that were actually on this film. I mean, you're going to these people's homes and hearing from their mouth their experience, their time spent on them, and you guys have some great extras on everything that you've done. So again, just thank you.
Thank you, and yes, let's together try to find one person a day, or one person every 2 days or 3 days. I think it's I think it keeps everyone happy and keeps everything alive. Just all talking and meeting. Obviously, it's not as easy to meet nowadays with COVID, but even if it's just meeting on the internet like we are now, it's important.
I completely agree. I'll give you back your day then, Adam. Thank you so much for spending the time to come on here and discuss. I really hope people seek out Third Window Films. And the last thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned Terracotta Distribution. They are like one of your main arms of your storefront now, basically, correct?
Yeah, yes. Joey, the owner of Terracotta, is a friend of mine for 20 years. Actually, I did a podcast yesterday. We do have the Third Window Films podcast, and we had him on as a guest, and it was a lot of reminiscing upon things that we'd forgotten about 20 years prior to. But he used to also run his own distribution company, which he does less and less nowadays. But he acts as a retailer, and
Right.
thanks to him, during COVID, when all the other people like Arrow doubled their commissions and really made it to a point where I didn't think I could continue anymore, to be honest. He
Wow.
is using his house just to ship out my Blu-rays and taking a percentage that is nowhere near what Amazon and Arrow and all the other big companies are asking. So I really anybody who wants to buy any of my discs, I always send them to Terracotta, and I always price point them. They're lower than everywhere else because he takes a smaller percentage, so it should be a win-win. But if you can, it's really him just putting stuff into packages and posting them out himself. So it's proper independent all around.
And there are frequently sales throughout the year. I mean, just a few months ago, you did the Takeshi Kitano. I think it was 4 Blu-rays for £20 sale. That was
Yeah, the
shockingly low.
Yeah, the thing is, the rights had expired and I couldn't renew them, so I had all this
Right.
stock left over. And if ever I do have stock left over or find stuff, sometimes I find stuff in a warehouse, like or something that's been out of print for like years, it goes straight to him, and he sells
Right.
it on his shop. So he always has yes, the best way to find anything that might be harder to find elsewhere.
Terracotta's great. I've talked to Joey a couple times. He's a brilliant dude. Again, thanks for your time, Adam. Everybody, please check out Third Window Films. They've got at least the Obayashi set coming out the rest of the year. Is there anything else that you can tease or any other ideas coming up?
I've been working on some Katsuhito Ishii films like Sharkskin Man and Peach Chip Girl and Party 7, which are quite the sort of films that Tarantino really loved and inspired him to make Kill Bill, in which he hired the director of those films to work on Kill Bill with him. So I think it's been 25 years since Sharkskin Man, and we're working on a remaster now. So hopefully it'll probably be next year. But there are some things like that I've got on the back burner, and yeah, hopefully things will move forward smoothly.
Awesome. Thank you again, Adam. Have a good day. Hope Tokyo treats you well.
Thank you.